Okay, so here is our question. We've only got 2 example questions we're going to look at. And I'm going to let you go. It says, find each length for the rectangle MNPQ round to the nearest tenth. So, again, it tells me this shape is a rectangle. So, I'm good to go with that. I know in a rectangle that opposite sides are congruent. So, if I know that this side is 4, then I know the other side is 4. Okay, but guess what? A rectangle is also a parallelogram. So you remember, do you remember all of our properties of parallelograms? So with a parallelogram, we found that opposite angles are congruent. We found adjacent angles are supplementary, or consecutive angles are supplementary. And then we had one more thing about a parallelogram.
The 2 diagonals, there's 2 sets of lengths.
Yes, it should be the diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. They cut each other into 2 equal pieces. So for a parallelogram, because I have 2 diagonals here that are bisected each other, that means that they're cut into 2 equal pieces. And then because this is a rectangle, if I can find the measure of one diagonal, the other diagonal is congruent. So I'm going to label this missing, like we don't have a point here. Let's call that point X. They're in the middle. So if I know from X to Q is 5, then what else could I say? N to X would be 5. So what's the entire distance of that diagonal? 10. So the distance from N to Q would be 10.
I think I know the U property because it's a rectangle. Diagonals are congruent. There's no U on there.
That's a good call. Okay, so if I know from N to Q, what's the measurement from N to Q?
N to Q's 10.
It's 10, and that's a diagonal.
Yep.
So the first question is P to M. What would it be?
10.
10, because it's the other diagonal. And diagonals are congruent.
Yep.
Questions? Huh? Questions about that? Now the second one is a little bit harder. It asks me to find what's the distance from M to Q.
It's 8.
That's what I said.
I think it's because you combine those 2 and it equals the top and bottom ones.
Because
So
I would
it's
assume
the
that
same.
You could draw a rectangle, little size, and see the long top.
Right. So we don't have any way to easily find MQ necessarily.
Could you use the Pythagorean theorem?
You could.
So could you, since you know what M to X is, and that's 5.
M to X?
Yeah, the middle.
Okay, yeah.
Length right there, the part where they
Okay.
intersect.
I got you.
Then P to M would be 5 as well. P to X
Yeah.
would be 5.
Okay.
So you have to do 5 squared plus 5 squared equals C squared.
Okay, so what triangle are you looking at?
The MPX triangle.
So if you went M, P, and X, they're all on one line.
So don't want
MPQ.
that's the one you should
MPX doesn't make a triangle.
MPX?
That's what you said was MPX.
What?
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
MXP?
MX.
I mean, N.
So from
NXQ.
NXP.
Oh,
No,
I thought
it's
you said
a straight line.
He's
It's
saying N.
MQ.
He's saying N, not M.
N
Yeah, my bad.
to X to P?
Yes.
Okay? So if I use, I got you. So if I use, let's talk about that very quickly. From N to X to P.
Yeah, that.
Is that a right triangle?
No.
No, so can I use a Pythagorean theorem with it? I can only use a Pythagorean theorem with a right triangle that needs a right angle. So that triangle is not helpful.
Can I have one?
Yep.
Can I-
Yep.
MPQ.
M to P to Q.
That's,
Is that a right triangle?
yep.
It is, because we use this angle Q, which is an angle of the rectangle, which we know has to be 90 degrees. Okay, so let's see. What distances do we know?
PQ is 4.
PQ is 4.
PM is 10.
PM is 10. And M to Q is what we're looking for.
So it would be
Let's call it Y.
4 squared plus B squared equals 10 squared. Or Y squared.
I agree. I use Y, you could use B, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is 10 has to be the hypotenuse.
Because it's the biggest side.
It's the longest side. It's opposite the right angle. So now if you're not sure how to solve this, make sure you're paying attention here. What is 4 squared? 16. Y squared is
Wow.
Y squared. 10 squared is 100. Now how could I solve?
You add 16 to 100.
Okay, close.
Subtract 16?
Going to subtract 16,
Only
right?
has positive
Because 16 is currently positive, so we would subtract 16.
That's 84.
That is 84. So Y squared equals 84.
Take the square root of that, it would be 8.
Take the square root.
It would be
That would
8.
not be
It is not 8. Oh
It would be
my god.
9 point something, because 9
Yeah,
times
it's
9 is
9 point.
81.
I agree. So you got to use your calculator. So what's the square root of 84? And everybody had to use their calculator for this. So
It's 9,005,
it's 9.16, I think,
which rounds to 9.2.
which will round to 9.2.
I got 7,000.
You said 7,000?
That means he did 84 squared.
Yeah.
He didn't square root it.
I don't think my calculator.
You're way off.
It does.
Another wonderful conversation with you.
So here we have a rectangle. Rectangle HJKG. It says find each length and angle measure for rectangle GHJK rounding to the nearest tenth. So that means we want 1 decimal place when necessary. So we know this shape is a rectangle. So what do we know? We know that diagonals are congruent. We know all the angles are 90. We know that the diagonals bisect each other. We know all those things. And we know opposite sides have to be congruent. So the first thing you'd ask, what's the measure of angle GHK? So that would be this angle here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we know that this big angle G has to be what? 90. So then what would this smaller portion of G be here? It is going to be 38. It's going to be 90 minus 52, which is going to give me 38.
And if you figure out K, because that would have, no,
K would be.
Yeah, it'd still be 90, but like the inside of it would be 52 and the outside would be 38.
So because we know that the diagonals are congruent and the diagonals bisect each other, that means all of these measurements are
the same.
the same. So if I look at HLG, that's an isosceles triangle, which means if this angle is 38 degrees, this angle is 38 degrees. And now in the big angle H, we know it has to be 90.
So the other angle is 52.
So the other one here would be 52. And I forgot what I was looking for, so let me go back and see here. It's asking me for G to H to K, so that would be the blue angle, right? What is angle GHK? That is going to be 38 degrees.
Oh.
Okay, 25 says find the angle HLJ. So from H to L to J.
I know.
So that's part of an isosceles triangle. So if we know that this angle is 52,
Other side.
the other smaller angle is also 52.
And that one has to equal 180.
Uh-huh.
So
So
add those and subtract about 180.
add these two, subtract from 180.
Minus 180 is
Uh-huh.
76.
Uh-huh. So now we know this central angle is 76. That's the second thing he was looking for. Okay, now the third one, what's the measure from G to J? From G to J. So this would be a diagonal. Right? So if I focus in on that diagonal,
We can do the Pythagorean theorem with HJK.
with HJK,
It's a right triangle.
okay, let's do that. I was going to draw a different one, but that's fine.
What is he gonna draw? JKG?
I was going to draw JKG, yes. Either one would work. Okay, so this is HJG. We know that H to J is 7. H to G would be
See,
10 because opposite sides are congruent with a rectangle.
and L.
And then I'm looking for this. This is my hypotenuse. We call it C.
So 7 squared plus C squared equals 10 squared.
No, wrong. Which of these is the hypotenuse?
C.
C. So
It's
C.
the
Opposite
yeah.
the right angle has to be the hypotenuse.
yeah.
That's the most important part. You have to get that part right.
7 squared plus 10 squared equals C squared.
Right.
49 plus 100.
So that says C squared equals 149. So you're going to take a square root with a calculator again.
Alright. 6.1.
It's not going to be 6. 12.20?
Yeah.
I agree. It's 12 point something.
I messed up.
So I found C here would have to be 12.2. Does anybody need help putting that in your calculator? So you're going to use the Pythagorean theorem a lot today. So you have to make sure you know how to do it. Then the last question says, what's the distance from H to L?
I got it right.
Well, we know the diagonals are congruent. So if JG is 12.2, HK is 12.2. And if I'm looking for the distance from H to L, that would be half of 12.2, which is 6.1.